April 3, 2026. Somewhere over southwestern Iran, an American pilot pulled the ejection handle. A U.S. Air Force F-15E Strike Eagle was shot down over Iran on Friday. One crew member from the plane was later rescued by American forces. The F-15E is flown by a two-member crew, and a search and rescue effort for the second crew member is still ongoing, as U.S. officials confirmed to CBS News. Now pause on that for a moment. Because before this happened, just 48 hours before an American fighter jet fell out of Iranian skies, the President of the United States stood in front of the entire nation and said the following words: "We've done all of it. Their Navy is gone. Their Air Force is gone. Their missiles are just about used up or beaten. They have no anti-aircraft equipment. Their radar is 100% annihilated. We are unstoppable as a military force." Those were not words spoken by a low-level spokesman. That was Donald Trump in a primetime address to the nation on Wednesday night, 2 days before Iran shot down a plane that America said no one could shoot down. This is the story of what happened today, why it matters far beyond one aircraft, and what it tells us about a war that Washington has been describing in a completely different language than the war that is actually being fought on the ground. To understand the full weight of what happened on April 3rd, you need to understand what the F-15E Strike Eagle actually represents, not just as a weapon system, but as a symbol of American air power and the assumptions built around it. The F-15E Strike Eagle is a twin-engine, all-weather fighter jet, originally developed during the Cold War to achieve air superiority. First flown in 1972 and introduced into service in 1976, the aircraft was designed after lessons from the Vietnam War, and when U.S. pilots faced unexpected challenges from Soviet-built fighters, it has earned a reputation for speed, maneuverability, and powerful radar, and is considered one of the most successful fighter aircraft in history. Originally conceived as a pure air-to-air combat jet, the F-15 evolved into multiple variants, including the two-seat F-15E Strike Eagle, which added advanced ground attack capabilities while retaining its air combat role. The F-15 has a combat record that no other fighter jet in history can match. It has never been shot down in air-to-air combat, not once, not by any country in any conflict since it entered service half a century ago. American pilots flew it through Desert Storm, through Iraq, through Afghanistan, through Syria, and in every single one of those campaigns, the F-15 came home. The aircraft became, in the minds of American military planners and in the mythology of American air power, essentially invulnerable in enemy skies. This would mark the first known combat loss of a U.S. manned aircraft during the entire conflict with Iran. Earlier in the war, a U.S. Air Force F-35, the Pentagon's most advanced stealth fighter jet, had to make an emergency landing after being struck by Iranian fire. The F-35 got hit. The F-15E came down. This was not a quiet, yet hidden loss that the military could manage below the media radar. The entire thing happened in real time, in the open, with Iranian state media broadcasting live footage of the wreckage, local governors offering bounties for the capture of American pilots, and Iranian TV anchors urging civilians to, in their words, shoot at any American aircraft they could see in the sky. Iranian state TV told Iranians that anyone who located the U.S. troops would be rewarded by the government. A state broadcaster offered local citizens a reward if they hand the Americans over to the authorities alive. A regional governor in Iran's southwest issued a public plea for locals to find those on board the F-15E, as with a representative of merchants and businesses reportedly offering the equivalent of $60,000 for the crew. $60,000 for an American airman, offered publicly on state television, in the middle of a war that the President of the United States declared was essentially over. Now let us talk about the cascade of events that followed the initial shoot-down, because this is where the scale of what happened becomes fully visible. An F-15 fighter jet and an A-10 attack plane were both lost to hostile fire on the same day. 2 Black Hawk helicopters involved in the search and rescue operation were also hit by Iranian fire, injuring the crews before both helicopters managed to return safely to their base. 4 American aircraft struck in a single day. The F-15E down. The A-10 down. 2 rescue helicopters hit while trying to recover the crew of the first plane. America sent its search and rescue force into Iranian territory to save its pilots, and Iran attacked the rescue mission itself. An unverified video said to be taken from the area showed an A-10C attack jet. The A-10 is well versed in the Sandy mission, a specialized combat search and rescue role in which the jets provide close air support for downed aircrew and escort rescue helicopters. This is the type of operation that the United States military has not had to conduct at significant scale since Vietnam. The Sandy mission, named after call sign used in Southeast Asia, is the procedure by which American forces fight their way into enemy territory to recover a downed crew before the enemy gets there first. The fact that the U.S. was running Sandy missions over Iran on April 3, 2026 tells you everything you need to know about the gap between the war Washington was describing and the war that was actually happening. Combat search and rescue missions have become relatively rare for U.S. forces after more than a generation of near-total air dominance, with American aircraft typically operating with limited threats to aircraft in the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. A generation, more than 20 years of American military operations in which the question of whether a pilot would be shot down was essentially theoretical. A generation in which American pilots flew into hostile airspace, knowing with near certainty that they were the most dangerous thing in the sky and that nothing on the ground could reliably touch them. That assumption, built over 20-plus years of operations in Afghanistan and Iraq, shaped everything about how the U.S. military planned, trained, equipped, and deployed its air assets in the current conflict with Iran. And that assumption was wrong. Iran's successful downing of the U.S. jet comes despite repeated claims from Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth and other officials that the U.S. had achieved dominance of the Iranian skies, not just Trump. Secretary of Defense Hegseth had also repeatedly stated that the United States and Israel had achieved total air dominance over Iran. CENTCOM Commander Admiral Brad Cooper stated on Thursday, the day before the F-15E was shot down, that Iranian air and missile defense systems had been largely destroyed and that American forces had made undeniable progress. Now, in our 5th week of the campaign, it is my operational assessment that we are making undeniable progress. We don't see their Navy sailing, we don't see their aircraft flying, and their air and missile defense systems have largely been destroyed. CENTCOM Commander Admiral Brad Cooper said just Thursday, the day before. And on Friday, Iran shot down an F-15E, hit 2 Black Hawks, brought down an A-10, and offered a public reward for the capture of American aviators on Iranian soil. Now, here is the detail that arms analysts were zeroing in on within hours of the first images circulating online. Although Iranian media initially claimed an F-35 had been shot down, images from the crash site clearly showed debris belonging to an F-15E Strike Eagle. The debris appeared to show the distinctive tail fin of an F-15E. The aircraft appeared to be from the USAF's 448th Fighter Wing, known as the Liberty Wing, which is normally based at RAF Lakenheath, approximately 80 miles northeast of London. Peter Layton, a former officer in the Australian Air Force and visiting fellow at the Griffith Asia Institute, told NBC News that the tail flash stripe markings visible in the debris photos were consistent with the 48th Fighter Wing based at RAF Lakenheath in the United Kingdom. The Liberty Wing, based in England, deployed to the Middle East for Operation Epic Fury, operating over Iranian airspace on the basis of official assurances that Iran had no anti-aircraft equipment and that American radar was 100% annihilated. The crew of that F-15E, a pilot and a weapons systems officer, flew their mission on the basis of those assurances. They flew into Iranian airspace believing the intelligence and the official statements that told them the threat had been neutralized. They flew, in other words, on the basis of a briefing that turned out to be wrong. 3 sources familiar with U.S. intelligence assessments told CNN that about half of Iran's missile launchers are still intact, and thousands of one-way attack drones remain in Iran's arsenal. Half of Iran's missile launchers still intact. After 5 weeks of the most intensive American bombing campaign in the region since Desert Storm, after repeated official declarations that Iran's military had been eviscerated, decimated, and reduced to a country that was no longer a threat. This is not a small discrepancy between public messaging and operational reality. This is a fundamental gap between what American officials were telling their own forces, their own public, and the world, and what was actually true on the ground, in the air, and in the targeting systems of Iran's surviving defense networks. I don't see a way out right now for the United States that's easy. Former Marine fighter pilot and Democratic candidate Amy McGrath told CNN, "People have to understand that Iran is the size and landmass of Vietnam, Iraq, and Afghanistan combined. So you're talking a long way. If this happens somewhere in the middle of Iran, then it's going to be very hard to sustain operations to try to find these aircrew, Vietnam, Iraq, Afghanistan combined. That is the search area that American Special Operations Forces are now operating in on the ground inside hostile territory, trying to reach an American airman before Iranian forces or Iranian civilians responding to a state TV reward offer can get there first. There have been unconfirmed reports online that one airman was captured by the sons of Haider al-Karrar in Iran. Now, they face the possibility, if they are not found in time, that one U.S. service member could be paraded in front of the world's media as a prisoner of war and held hostage in any future peace negotiations. A prisoner of war in Iran, paraded on state television. That is the scenario that American officials are now racing against the clock to prevent, a scenario that, if it materializes, will transform the political dynamics of this entire conflict in ways that no military objective, no matter how successfully achieved, can offset. Because the moment an American prisoner of war appears on Iranian television, every calculation changes, every negotiation changes, every domestic political calculation in Washington changes. The war that Trump declared was nearing completion on Wednesday becomes something else entirely on the day an American airman appears in an Iranian prison jumpsuit. There have been 13 Americans killed during the campaign so far. 3 F-15Es were previously shot down by friendly fire during the war, though all 6 pilots ejected safely in that incident. 13 Americans killed, 3 F-15Es lost to friendly fire earlier in the war, and now a 4th F-15E, a confirmed combat loss, brought down by Iranian forces that were supposed to have been completely neutralized. The story of April 3, 2026, is not simply the story of one aircraft going down over one country in one war. It is the story of the gap between declared victory and actual war. It is the story of what happens when official statements about an enemy's capabilities become so disconnected from the operational reality that American pilots fly their missions based on intelligence that is fundamentally wrong. Iran shot down a U.S. Air Force F-15 fighter jet on Friday. The downing of the U.S. plane undermined an assertion of strength President Donald Trump made in a nationally televised speech earlier this week. They have no anti-aircraft equipment. their radar is 100% annihilated. We are unstoppable as a military force. Unstoppable. That was Wednesday. On Friday, Iran proved otherwise. The F-15E has never been shot down in air-to-air combat in 50 years of service. Its record was considered one of the most remarkable in the entire history of military aviation. A zero-loss record against every adversary it had ever faced in the sky. Iran just ended that record, not with a fleet of advanced fighters, not with a generation of stealth technology, with an air defense system that Washington said had been 100% annihilated. And somewhere over southwestern Iran tonight, one American airman is safe, and one is still missing. The helicopters that went in to find him were shot at. The A-10 that went in to protect the helicopters came down. The war that was almost over on Wednesday is, as of tonight, something else entirely.